Welcome back, guys. We are on to part 4 for chapter 55, and this section is really going to focus on sort of the big pictures with your ecological or your biogeochemical cycles. So, when we talk about nutrient cycles within an ecosystem, we're really talking about how do I move these chemicals both through the biological or biotic portions of my ecosystem, as well as moving them through your abiotic components or those geochemical processes that are going to move nutrients between both the organic and inorganic parts of our ecosystem. And while your energy is going to flow in one direction through your ecosystems, your nutrients are really going to cycle and get recycled and reused throughout your ecosystem. So life on Earth really depends on this recycling of these essential elements because remember, conservation of mass tells us we can't create or destroy it. We can only transfer it from one form to the next. Okay. So some of the major cycles are your carbon, oxygen, sulfur, nitrogen, phosphorus gets thrown in there. Obviously, the water cycle is also there. All right. And these gaseous elements really are going to occur kind of up in our atmosphere and get cycled globally, whereas things like your phosphorus, potassium, calcium, those sorts of elements aren't quite so mobile because they're not in a gas form. A lot of those tend to get tied up into rocks and minerals and that sort of thing. And so they're going to cycle a lot more locally within your terrestrial systems, although we throw them into some sort of aquatic ecosystem and all of a sudden being dissolved in that can help them get cycled a little more broadly. All right. But when we talk about a nutrient cycle kind of in general, we're talking about sort of these main reservoirs, which is what you're seeing in the picture there. And what are the processes that transfer and convert those nutrients from one reservoir to the next? All right, and you've got all sorts of things there like the burning of fossil fuels, assimilation, respiration, decomp, weathering and erosion, fossilization. So all of that, those processes then link these different reservoirs between organic matters that are actually available to the organisms ready to use versus organics that are kind of tied up into things like coal and oil that us as living things can't utilize for our own purposes to feed ourselves, although of course humans use it for other purposes, as well as inorganics that are both available and unavailable depending on the forms that they're found in. All right, so this picture is a good one to spend some time with, just kind of see the links and see the reservoirs, tie this image to specific cycles so that you can make all of those connections. It's really going to be a big deal here. Okay. So when we study the cycling of these different nutrients, whether it be water, carbon, phosphorus, whatever, we really kind of focus on 4 major factors. What's the chemical's biological importance? Why is it important to living things? What are the forms in which each chemical is available and utilized by the organisms? What are your major reservoirs? And then what are the key processes? So as you're going through and studying these cycles, those are the 4 things you really want to keep in mind. All right. What's their importance? How do we move them and where do they get stored? Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and take you through each of the cycles. I'll kind of pop up the pictures, but you should really spend some time on looking at figure 55.14, and that's going to go through those 4 steps of biological importance, the reservoir, so on and so forth, and make sure that you're familiar with them. All right, so here's your water cycle, your precipitation, your evapotranspiration, so on and so forth. Your carbon cycle, all right, most students know the photosynthesis, the respiration, but don't forget the decomp and the burning of the fossil fuels. All right, your nitrogen cycle, your ammonification, your nitrification, all right, sort of looking at very small scale, but then not forgetting that you have a much bigger scale going on in terms of denitrification, your industrial fixation, using them for fertilizers, all right, the fixation in the atmosphere, and so on and so forth. And your phosphorus cycle is the other one that you should be aware of. All right, so the leaching out of the ground, the decomp, all right, the runoff, so on and so forth. When you're taking a look at those nutrient cycles, don't forget the really key role that a lot of your decomposers play within that general chemical cycling. All right, they have a huge role in really being the ones that recycle those chemicals so that they're making them available again to the biotic portion of your ecosystems. All right, but the rates that your nutrients actually cycle can vary relatively differently from one type of ecosystem to another. All right, so sort of looking more at a biome level, that decomp rate is going to differ, which then causes the rates of that nutrient cycling to differ. So decomp really gets controlled by temperature, moisture, and nutrient availability. The higher the temp, the more moisture you have, the more nutrients you have, the more rapid that decomp is going to be. And so what you end up with is actually relatively low levels of nutrients within the soil. Okay, so rapid decomp, because it's happening so quickly, you're not able to fix those nutrients quite as well. So compared to cold or wet ecosystems where they store a lot of the undecomp organic matter, then your decomp rates are really low. So decomposition is slow in anaerobic environments as well. So all of that kind of stuff, if you take a look here up at the figure, all right, you've got different ecosystem types, all right, and the letters here correspond to what's going on down here, and you're looking at the mass that gets lost versus your annual temp, all right, and so something like your U here, which is very mountainous, they have a reasonable annual temperature, all right, but then they lose a lot more. So kind of your best scenario is somewhere here in the middle. And if you take a look at kind of just a general overview, okay, you get these connections between both the abiotic reservoirs and the geologic processes, and then how do they move through your producers, consumers, so on and so forth.